What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. It has been a while. Goody and I took, it wasn't even really us taking time off. It started with the COVID outbreak, and we were breaking down news as it happened, and then quiet. It went quiet on the COVID news for the Leafs. We didn't really have more players going in. There wasn't much more to update on. And then the league decides to shut down. We throw out a bunch of videos about the league shutting down, potentials, news for the Olympics, what may happen there. And then next thing you know, league shuts down. We're into the holiday break. We take some time off. So it's been a little while since we've had a video come out here. But we have some news. We have some updates. The NHL is back up and playing. The Olympics, we have pulled out of the Olympics officially. World Juniors are canceled. We'll have a bunch of videos coming out over the next little while, breaking down players' reactions to that, talking about what may happen with the World Juniors, what the Olympics should do to fill in those spots, how they can make it more competitive, what they can do for those players that have missed out on international opportunities. But as far as this video goes, we are going to focus right back on the Leafs, bringing it back home to where we've been talking about, what we've been talking about, what this channel is all about. Let's start this one off right away with a new updates about the Leafs COVID list, run through some of the players. Today it was announced that Timothy Liljegren, or yesterday, my apologies, was announced that Timothy Liljegren was added to the COVID list, and that adds him to a list of David Kampf, Ilya Mikheyev, Peter Mrazek, Rasmus Sandin, goaltending coach Steve Briere, Morgan Riley, William Nylander, and Jake Muzzin. And now the problem being, obviously, is that it's a 10-day quarantine period or self-isolation, whatever you'd like to call it. And a lot of these guys have had their positive tests within the last 5-6 days, a bunch of them, so they wouldn't be available for Saturday's game against the Ottawa Senators. And then other news out of the Sens here, just specifically about this, the Sens still have goaltender Forsberg in COVID protocol, and they have 3 coaching members as well, including head coach DJ Smith in there. You also have to remember they had an outbreak earlier this year, so their numbers are probably going to be down from that anyways, of guys not getting it again here. But as this goes along, as we have more players out, it's getting to one of those periods where, and I know you've been on the Raptors streams talking about that, breaking down Raptors stuff. You might be the honestly best person to talk to in terms of how this could look going forward. Is with the NBA bringing in all these replacement guys, we're getting to a point where the NHL has brought back taxi squads here. I got to ask, first of all, how significant is the impact on the quality of play having all these replacement guys in there instead of your typical night in, night out guys on the roster?
Oh, it'll be significant. Definitely significant. Look at what the Raptors lost by the other night, 144-99, 45-point deficit. And the Raps do a pretty good job of keeping things close most times. But back to the subject of hockey here, I think that the NBA or the NHL is taking note of what other leagues, including the NBA, have done, and the NFL too, in terms of fighting through COVID protocols and finding people to fill in. I mean, you have a very deep system in the AHL, ECHL, USHL. It goes down so deep in terms of where people can pull prospects from. And I understand that it's all going to be coming out of the A, but at a certain point, you got to realize that this thing isn't going away. I'm not saying it shouldn't be taken seriously. It definitely should be. But the NHL, by bringing back taxi squads, they're preparing to go back to business as per usual and hopefully not take a pause like this again. It's swept through the league. At this point, we're probably coming up to maybe half of the players having all tested positive at some point in the past couple of years, which means that I think we're going to get back to normal regardless of what COVID's doing. But I think that in terms of the Leafs situation, it's going to be ugly for a couple of games. But still, the Leafs are a deep team with a lot of top-end talent. I have a feeling even if they're undermanned for a couple games, they'll probably still go to overtime or win one of them. I'm not too worried. I'm just happy to see that the league's getting teams back out on the ice, even if it's just a fraction of the lineup. It's an unfortunate reality, but sometimes it'll play into the Leafs' hand, right? Maybe even at some point this season that I didn't pick up on, we were exploiting a team that had some COVID protocol issues of their own. But, it happens to everybody. It's just the Leafs' turn right now.
Yeah, and some of the guys who would be back in time for Saturday's game, now the part of the problem becomes conditioning, but I mean, hey, everyone's kind of had to deal with this, and hopefully being in Toronto, they found a way to keep themselves in shape, keep themselves conditioned, but some of these guys who would be available for Saturday include Kampf, Mikheyev, Mrazek, Sandin, and the goaltending coach Steve Briere. Riley, Nylander, Muzzin, and Liljegren would all remain out. But again, even with this extended break, it also gives guys like Sandin and Marner opportunities to get healthy and get back into the lineup here. So we can see a possibility of them kind of jumping back in here. Maybe they're good to go just from a health and like a physical health standpoint from their injuries. But I mean, as you said, we do need to figure out a way to push on. And I think one thing you and I have talked about a couple times on here is the taxi squads being a good thing. Like, I am very strongly of the opinion that the NHL should have started the season with taxi squads. And I understand there's problems with it logistically and financially for some teams. But that being said, like, it's not as though we went into this season thinking, hey, COVID's done, it's gone forever. We knew it was going to be lingering. They had protocols in place for handling COVID, for what may happen with outbreaks. And as we'll break down in Olympic videos that we get into over the next couple of days, is that the NHL had a plan in place in case COVID disrupted the season and the players couldn't go to the Olympics. Like, there was things in place for these situations. I kind of think the taxi squad should have been something they started with. But hey, it's better late than never. Add them in now. And we can push. Yeah, we can push on and get through this season. So that's a good thing there, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the big key. Is it's going to be ugly for the first little bit, but
it'll be choppy too, because you also remember all these guys being out. So some of them are going to be out of condition just from COVID, but then also everyone took 2 weeks off. Like, everyone stopped.
No, exactly. And then you add into the fact that some people are going to be recovering from a pretty serious illness. It's going to be a weird return back to play. But I'm just happy to see it happening, because this is something, like you've been saying there for the last point, is that it's going nowhere. Like, we knew it was going to be here. So to pause the season to make sure people don't become COVID, I'm not saying go get COVID positive, but to pause the season to protect everyone, just to shut it down every time there's a positive test. I mean, you're going to be banging your head against that wall for the next 10 years. It makes sense that we got to find something to improvise in the meantime when people are out getting the help that they need. And for the Leafs, unfortunately, there's a few bodies on that list right now. But even you said it, the Sens went through their thing earlier. And I know with the Cavs, for example, and especially the Philly, the teams that the Raptors have lost to with all their guys out early in the season, they had their COVID swing that really put them down. What comes around goes around, and the Leafs are on the receiving end right now of COVID, and that sucks. But at least we'll be coming back to play, and there's not a full quarantine for our players. Like, we're already coming back to play with them having done some of it, so it won't be at its worst extent, which is good.
Yeah, exactly. But now to get into the second part of this video, and it's talking about more of a logistical problem that the NHL may be facing, and not necessarily the players in the league, but more so, I guess, the players for Canadian teams, and how the NHL is actually going to handle this from a revenue standpoint, from where the games are going to be played and where the travel is going to be restricted to, is today, I mean, less than an hour before we got on here to record, Ontario announces there is a spectator limit of 1,000 fans at games, and that would cover the Leafs, the Raptors, and the Ottawa Senators games. And although that's not like the craziest update that we've heard, especially considering the Habs played a game without fans earlier already, and we saw a whole season last year without any fans, and we had a point where there was a playoff game with 500 people, or like these news updates aren't even that weird anymore. Imagine telling me 2 years ago that the Leafs would be playing a full season in arenas without fans. I would never believe it, but at this point, to say, hey, 1,000 fans is the max, it's like, oh, okay. And we move on. But where the big problem with this comes in is revenues. Now, the NHL has announced, and they came out and said they will not be playing games in Montreal. They would be postponing games for as long as Quebec holds the rule in place that fans can't be in the stands at games, because the NHL would be losing revenues from tickets for that. Now, and I don't know this for sure, this is pure speculation, but I cannot imagine the NHL would be happy with having 1,000 people in that game. It is 1,000. 1,000 is more than zero. So, I mean, like, that's just a blatant obvious. Yes, 1,000, zero, it's more. But is that going to really help the NHL at all if they're going to have, and you go across all 7 Canadian teams here, you're going to lose however many fans, 15 to 20,000 fans per game for every single home game that's played in Canada now, because you can only have 1,000, 2,000 fans in your stands. I cannot imagine the NHL is going to be happy about that, and it's going to be interesting to see how they want to play this out and if they're actually going to allow games to be played in Canada at this point.
If they can make it work to play all the American teams or do an American heavy hosting schedule for the next little while Canada recovers, I mean, if they can do that without running up the bill too much on whatever the cost of switching things up would be, which I'm sure there is one,
Yeah.
if that still makes it profitable to do, I say by all means go ahead and do it, because they've lost a lot of money doing the right things before. Like not allowing anybody in the arena, which, like you said, would have been crazy to even think about a couple of years ago. But it's very much so a reality now that we often think about. And here we are with only 1,000 people left in the arena or allowed to be in. So I get why the NHL is looking at this like, come on now, we've lost too much money. I get you need to do what you need to do, but to respond accordingly by going and front loading the schedule with American games, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They need their money. It's how they operate, and they did the right thing for all of last season and the season before, trying to protect players and fans. And now, like I said, it's coming back to regular life where I think everyone's looking for feasible options. And if Quebec's saying we still need this, then I respect NHL for, choosing not an alternative, but a reasonable route to circumvent losing all that money.
Yeah. See, I think that where it becomes concerning as a fan of a Canadian team, and I mean, you and I aren't people who are going to every game. We don't have seasons tickets. Like, that's not the kind of position we're in. It's more about the comfortability of the players and their families and stuff like that, because it really impacts them. Like, is the NHL going to get to a point where maybe maybe they just decide, hey, we got to just finish this season out just in America? Because if you're looking at a position where you can get the Leafs into the Sabres arena and you can get the Sens into the Sabres arena and they can play home games out of Buffalo for the next 2.5 months until Canada gets back, I would imagine they'd rather that situation. I would imagine the NHL would rather that situation, because they're still going to get fans at those games, and they're going to get more than 1,000 fans for every game in Buffalo, and the NHL can grab those revenues.
So I guess what you're saying is you think it's a slippery slope to allow this, because it's like a take an inch, give a mile kind of scenario where the NHL will be like, okay, we're already playing in the US. This is so much easier. Let's just stay here the rest of the season. Like you're saying that you're afraid of that scenario happening.
Because my thought on it is really, and it's as you said, and you kind of had me thinking about it, is like, okay, so let's say they front load this for the next, just for the sake of it, like month and a half. They say, Toronto, no home games. All you're going to do is play on the road, and they can figure that out, right? Well, what happens if a month and a half from now, we still can't play at home? Okay, so now, all the rest of your road games, we're going to push them up, and over the next month now, we'll still finish out your road games. And then now you have, 20 home games left to play? And the NHL is going, oh my God, first of all, we have 20 straight home games. You're going to sit at home for 20 straight games and have teams filter through there. If that's possible, if Toronto can have full capacity back in their stands, or 70% or whatever the NHL deems acceptable for revenue-wise, and they say, okay, yeah, we'll get you guys back in there. The rest of the NHL may have a problem with it, and the owners and the GMs, because they're going to be like, okay, seriously, we have to go to Toronto and play like 5 games in Toronto because of how the schedule worked out. Or, I mean, that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean? Like, we're going to have to roll through there. These guys are in a playoff race, and they get 20 straight home games. Calgary and Edmonton are battling for games, and Calgary has 20 home games left, and Edmonton only has 10. Like, this is where it could go to. And then what if the NHL is even looking at it on the flip side, and they go, okay, you have 20 home games left, and we still can't go back to Canada. Now you're going to have to play like 20 straight away games somewhere else. Like, maybe they just say, hey, Toronto, Ottawa, Buffalo is now your home building for the rest of this season.
I just feel like, the NHL, the money that goes through that league, it's like, you can use an analogy here. It's like a game of musical chairs, right? Toronto, when the Leafs are playing in town, that's when the music's going. But you don't want to have Arizona on your hands when the music's not going anymore. And the league owns a whole bunch of those teams. The NHL has an affinity with buying weird destinations and keeping them alive, like Arizona. But if Toronto doesn't have suits filling the lower bowl, and that ridiculous ticket fee that everyone's willing to pay to go in and watch the Leafs play. And even from a morale standpoint, I mean, the NHL is largely based out of Toronto. At least their administration is. So I just see it from the standpoint of, okay, like I think the league has every interest of getting back there, because as much as playing at a Buffalo might be better from health and safety protocols, I don't think like they would make just so much more money trying to get back into Toronto, even if it's for a final stretch of games. That's my feeling on it. Of course, if the situation is so drastic that you can't do it without risking lives, then okay, I understand. But you got to hope that a month and a half from now, this is a little bit more under control, because the variant's already been sweeping through for like all of December. 2 weeks from now, I would imagine that hopefully it's dying down, if not already gone, or at least at a reasonable amount to start opening things back up.
Hey, I agree with you, and I don't want them to have to do it. And I do think they are valuing the health, and I do also agree with the fact that it's going through now, and hopefully by that point they can say, okay, yeah, we've played a bunch of away games, we've given it some time, we can get back in there. But I mean, honestly, like as much as it is like calling out corporate, I don't know, like greed's the wrong word, but like essentially that's kind of the point that I'm trying to go across here, is like they need some money here, and they need to get some of this money back from all the games that they've had without fans. And you think about what happened in Canada last year where they had no fans. Well, the States were playing with games with full barns. And if they can get to a point where they just have every game playing with full or 50% plus fans in the stands, regardless of if those teams are playing at home. And I completely agree, they want to get back here, like they want to get back to Toronto. But if you're gonna say, okay, in Toronto we can get 1,000 fans in the stands, or in Buffalo we can get 10,000 at a Leafs home game where they play I don't know, Leafs and Ottawa playing in Buffalo on Saturday night. Like if they can say we get 10,000 plus people there, or we get 1,000 in Toronto, the NHL from a revenue and standpoint, they're probably gonna take that above the overall, like, yeah, this is the health and safety of what's going on here. I think that could be a situation. I don't want it to happen. I do not want it to happen.
I get what you mean. It's definitely something you need to explore. Like, I mean, just because it's never happened before doesn't mean it won't. We've learned that over these past couple seasons. Yeah, it's interesting food for thought. I would like to hope that we end up returning back to the seat, or like back to Toronto for that last little bit of the season. But the thing that really intrigues me that you've brought up is the idea of how can the NHL let a playoff team or any team go into the crucial stretch where you're pushing into postseason with like 15 consecutive home games. Like it does seem a little ridiculous from advantage wise. And even though it's the same surface, same opponents, realistically, you're traveling into that city where the Leafs get to be comfortable for a month on end, just doing nothing, filtering team. Like, it is a massive advantage. I wonder about it from that standpoint as criteria that could stop it from happening. But who knows? We'll find out soon. But it's interesting to explore the different ways this could go for the NHL.
Yeah, and like on to your point too, right? If I think what the league's most concerned about at this point is having fans in the stands. Okay, so let's say at that point you can have fans back there. Now you're going to get that competitive edge on it as well. You're coming down the playoff stretch and you got 15 straight home games. Like people are going to be juiced up to get into those arenas and watch those home games and watch their team compete for playoff spots. And like you're the Edmonton Oilers and you're sitting on a playoff spot and you've got to battle your last 15 games to hold on to it. You think that arena's not going to be sold out of like Connor McDavid and Draisaitl just going absolutely nuts, putting up points night in, night out, like people going insane in there. Like those people are going to be dying for some hockey, dying for something. Like they could just have that aspect. And I mean,
true.
There is the human element of like, yeah, it doesn't guarantee you wins, but it's also just a crazy atmosphere to think about. That could be the case.
No, fully could. We don't know yet, so we'll be seeing. But it's an interesting topic for sure.
And it's obviously a very drastic approach to all of this, and that we could play all these games in the U.S. and it's not something that has been, hey, this is the possibility, or hey, we're leaning towards this. It's more something that Josh and I were thinking this is a potential thing that could happen. I did hear Mike Johnson on TSN talk about how the NHL could have to And it's not that they've looked into it because they want to, but they could be forced into a situation where they have to explore this option and explore if this is going to be more feasible for the league. So something Josh and I want to come on here and actually just break down of, hey, this could happen and what would it look like if this does. So we don't want this to be the case. We do not want to see that happen, but we gotta come on here and talk about it. But I mean, hey, it's been a while since we got on here to record a video, Goody. Feels good to be back. Feels good to be talking about hockey, talking about the Leafs, the NHL again. As more news comes out, and also, by the way, I did, while we were recording, get an update. So as we leave, I will give this quick little update out there. As news. Some of the guys that I mentioned, yes, live, as some of the guys that I mentioned were on that COVID protocol list, here is a tweet from Leafs PR that I just picked up. Players practicing today, December 30th. Forwards Bunting, Engvall, Kampf, who was on the list, Kasha, Kerfoot, Marner, who was injured, Matthews, Mikheyev on the list, Ritchie, back, Simmons, Spezza, Tavares, defenseman Biega, Brody, Dermott, Hall, Kivahalme, Chris, Sandin, who is on the list, and then Campbell, Hutchison, and Mrazek, who is also on the list. So we are seeing a bunch of guys who are on that list getting back onto the ice, so they are good. They are clearly out of protocols if they're doing this now. So at least the Leafs are moving back towards a position where they're going to get a bunch of guys back on the ice. Still, obviously, just final update on it is Liljegren, Riley, Nylander, Muzzin remain out. Muzzin will be out and Liljegren will be out for a foreseeable
If Bunting's back, we're good.
Yeah, but hey, we're all good. We got a bunch of guys coming back, so we'll continue to update things as we hear more, as the NHL produces more news, as we hear more things out of the government of Ontario and MLSE if there's more updates. All that can be found on this channel. We will be having videos come out about the Olympics, the World Juniors, different comments calling out the NHL, different things that are happening there. So if you are interested in any of that, you like what we've talked about on here, make sure you like and comment on this video. Subscribe to this channel. We will have more stuff coming. Leafs fans, NHL fans, hockey fans, whoever you are, thank you guys for tuning into this video. We appreciate it. We appreciate the support. Keep believing.
Signing off.